So let's take you closer to the story now. Liz Raines is the morning anchor for Anchorage station KTVA.
Well, Andrew, right now, National Transportation Safety Board officials are headed to Alaska from Washington. And just to give you an idea, we're here in Anchorage. We're the closest TV station, but we're still about 800 air miles from Ketchikan. Just a few minutes ago, we noticed some cracks. I want to show you this here on the ground. Construction crews just finished clearing the road here behind me, but there's still a lot of fiberglass and wood blowing around, which is why we're wearing protective gear. The other thing that we're seeing out here tonight, Scott, some people protesting the way that these meetings are being held. We're seeing signs like these ones right here that say, "Make it public." Today's turn of events is still a first for the nation. Even though Governor Dunleavy got diverted to Kotzebue, he's still the first U.S. governor to take the oath above the Arctic Circle. The College of Health has created a new umbrella course that introduces students to 45 different certificate and degree programs. And it lets them try on different healthcare professions. Like in this case, surgery. The two survivors in that crash have been taken to the hospital, and I want to show you where we are out here because this all happened just right next door to some homes. Things are looking good for him at this point, but we've seen in some of the polls that it could come down to the wire, could really come down to those absentee votes. Rhonda, what a moment we just witnessed here in Norvik. Joe, there are some interesting things happening in this district, including large numbers of adults registered to vote in a single home who residents there say they never heard of. A former legislative staff member says State Representative Dean Westlake of Kiana groped her and made an unwelcome sexual advance toward her earlier this year. She's asked that we not release her full name, but refer to her only by her first name, Olivia. Well, we found out about this relationship with a minor by researching court documents. How well did the Alaska Democratic Party vet Mr. Westlake as a candidate?
Yeah, so that's a huge misconception about the role of the party in candidates. Candidates come forward, they file on their own. The party cannot keep someone from filing for office. Representative Westlake...
But the party supported him as a candidate.
Sure, so Representative Westlake ran twice. He ran in 2014 and in 2016. And the party did support him because he ran against an incumbent who was a Democrat but had caucused with the minority. So we couldn't support his we couldn't support his opponent in 2016.
But you could support someone who had a history of a sexual relationship with a minor?
You know, so it's not about that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Liz Raines. Welcome to a special election edition of Nightcast. There's been a lot of talk about Anchorage's first ever vote by mail election happening right now. So tonight, we'd like to dedicate this program to addressing concerns, identifying problems in the process so far, and helping connect you with the information you need to cast your ballot correctly. We'll get to all of that in just a minute, but first, we have some breaking news tonight.
She contributed thousands of dollars to her own campaign while the state says she was illegally collecting food stamps. Last night, we told you about the felony charges State Senate candidate Becca Hollett faces for welfare fraud. KTVA 11's Liz Raines has continued to dig into the candidate's background and joins us now with what else in Hollett's candidacy doesn't check out, including a pageant crown. Liz.
But Joe, after the state came out with felony charges against Hollett for welfare fraud earlier this month, we wondered whether the rest of Hollett's story checks out, and it turns out there's quite a bit that doesn't. On paper, 33-year-old Becca Hollett is an accomplished woman. Her campaign website says she owns 2 businesses and lists more than a dozen awards, including being named Mrs. Alaska in 2014. But we couldn't find any evidence of Hollett in that role. In fact, according to the Mrs. Alaska USA's website, Mrs. Alaska 2014 was a woman named Erica Chilla, and the Mrs. Alaska America pageant says their winner that year was April Wallen. Both pageants say they're the only 2 sanctioned pageants in the state. According to their records, Hollett has never won a state pageant, though she has competed in the past. But that's perhaps the most benign of the inconsistencies in Hollett's campaign. Earlier this month, the state of Alaska filed felony charges against Hollett and her husband Jarek for welfare fraud. According to charging documents, investigators found the couple had a bank account that contained between $35,000 and $40,000 at the time. The state later concluded the couple was well above the food stamps resource limit during the entire time they received food stamps. During that time, Hollett somehow contributed thousands of dollars of her own money to her campaign. According to state records, Hollett made two $2,000 deposits just last month while on public assistance. Hollett identifies as self-employed, listing her occupation as a businesswoman. But according to state records, Hollett has just one active business license for a mobile food service called Super Beans. A Facebook page with that name identifies the business as a coffee shop. But when we went to the location listed online, all we found was an empty parking lot. With several claims that don't appear to match up, Hollett's bid for office now raises questions about whether what's printed on her campaign site is really an accurate reflection of what's written in her past.
The actual swearing in itself didn't quite go as anyone had planned. There are so many things that we can't control in this state, one of them, of course, being the weather. But in the end, it made for a dramatic day in Alaska history, a story with several twists. Alaska was slated to make history when Governor Mike Dunleavy chose Norvik for his swearing-in ceremony, the village where his wife Rose grew up.
It's amazing to have your own classmate as a first lady. It's beautiful.
The tiny town had been preparing for days, but then something happened no one could prepare for. A storm forced Dunleavy's flight to divert to Kotzebue. By constitution, he had to be sworn into office by noon, which meant he wouldn't make it to Norvik in time. But the show went on. Alaska had not one, but two swearing-in ceremonies, the official one in Kotzebue and a symbolic one in Norvik. The crowd, glued to a live stream, cheered as the First Lady made her way to the stage and gave the new governor a standing ovation. Just as it looked like the ceremony had come to a close, a plane appeared on the runway.
Welcome home.
Welcome.
Well, thanks for having
Welcome.
me. Sorry we're late. We had a little detour at a place called Kotzebue.
The inaugural celebration was just getting started. Dunleavy came bearing big promises.
And I just want to let you know, as your governor moving forward, that you will never be forgotten. Whether it has to do with the educational system, you won't be forgotten. Whether it has to do with crime, things like sexual assault, you are not going to be forgotten.
He prayed with locals.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
And broke bread with villagers in a potlatch feast, the first governor ever to choose rural Alaska for the big celebration.
You are our people. And you accepted me a long time ago when I came up here and married one of your daughters. And I've never forgotten that.
As Mother Nature would have it, the spotlight shined bright enough to include two Arctic communities on the historic day.
Perhaps the most legendary moment in sled dog history happened right here in this building that used to be the town's old nurses' chambers. In 1925, a sled dog team brought life-saving serum here for the people inside. The more than 1,000-mile race to stop a diphtheria epidemic put Nome in the national spotlight. But today, there's little left standing from that time.
Bertha Lenhar is a musher on a mission.
It's just a part of history that we hate to have torn down and destroyed.
Lenhar is determined to save this home, which once belonged to Leonard Sapala, a musher instrumental in the 1925 serum race to Nome.
The city wants to get rid of some of the houses that are in Nome that are vacant because they are fire hazards.
But Lenhar wants to restore it and the memory of Sepala's dogs.
It was his dog, Balto, and his dog, Togo, who ended up coming into Nome with serum.
Balto took the gold for that one with musher Gunnar Cossin, but Fritz, who ran a longer stretch of the serum race with Sepala, is still here today.
Fritz is often called the unsung hero. So the original plan was, as it's told, is Sepala was supposed to make the final run on into Nome, and Cossin kind of stepped in there towards the last minute and said, hey, I'll take the serum from here.
The medicine saved dozens of lives and potentially an entire town.
Probably as close as we can get to the original.
Now Lenhar wants to revive that legacy by breathing new life into this building. Every year, dog teams run a race similar to the Great Serum Race, training to cross nearly 1,000 miles of Alaska wilderness to reach Nome. While Nome and the race have changed over time, the Iditarod keeps that iconic moment alive in the hearts and minds of Alaskans and the world. Reporting from the finish line, Liz Raines, KTVA 11 News.